The scream shattered the morning stillness, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury. It was followed by a woman's voice, sharp and high, railing against the absurdity of a hoofed beast on her manicured lawn. The camera pulls back, revealing a gentle, ancient cow, placid and unbothered, gazing at a brand-new, gleaming SUV. The woman storms closer, finger-pointed, venom in her eyes. And in a moment of sublime, slow-motion defiance, the impossible happens. The cow turns, lets out a long, deliberate sigh, and begins to lower itself onto the hood. Liam's life was measured in seasons, sunrises, and the rhythmic hum of the milking machine. His farm, a patchwork of rolling green pastures and time-worn barns, was the last holdout on the eastern edge of Copper Creek Valley. The world beyond his fence lines was changing, the suburban sprawl creeping closer with every passing year. Developers had bought the old Cooper homestead next door, razed the dilapidated farmhouse, and in its place, erected a monument to modern excess, a sleek, gray box with oversized windows and a driveway so meticulously paved it looked like a black mirror. The owners, the Harringtons, had arrived 3 weeks ago. Liam hadn't seen much of them, just glimpses of a man in a crisp polo shirt and a woman who looked permanently annoyed, her blonde bob perfectly coiffed. He knew their names from the town rumor mill. Penny Harrington, the kind of person who seemed to breathe irritation. His farm, his animals, were his life. He'd inherited the land from his grandfather, along with a deep, quiet reverence for its rhythm. His most prized possession wasn't a tractor or a barn, but his beloved cow, Bessie. She was a Holstein, enormous and placid, with the soulful brown eyes of an old friend. Bessie wasn't just livestock. She was family. Her mother had been his grandfather's favorite, and her grandmother before that. She was a link to the past, an anchor in a world that seemed to be rushing headlong into a future he didn't quite understand. That morning, the early light cast long, purple shadows across the valley. Liam finished his chores, the scent of hay and fresh milk clinging to his clothes. He leaned against the pasture fence, watching Bessie graze. She was a creature of habit, but lately she'd been restless. A new stretch of fence, weakened by a winter storm he hadn't had time to fully repair, was a constant source of worry. He'd patched it, but it was a temporary fix at best. He went inside for coffee, the brief break a necessity before he tackled the day's work. The cup was still steaming in his hands when the sound came. It started as a high-pitched shriek, followed by a torrent of sharp, angry words. It was a sound that had no business in the quiet of a country morning. It was a city sound, a human-made siren of pure rage. He dropped his mug, the ceramic cracking on the linoleum. He didn't need to look to know what had happened. He sprinted out the door, across the yard, and toward the fence line. The sight that greeted him was both comical and deeply unsettling. Bessie, a gentle giant of nearly 1,800 pounds, stood on the Harringtons' pristine lawn. She hadn't just wandered in. She was standing right in the middle of it, a massive black and white splotch on a canvas of impossible green. And standing a few feet away, hands on her hips, was Penny Harrington, her face a mask of incandescent fury. She wasn't just angry. She was radiating a type of urban entitled rage Liam had only ever seen on television. "What is this? Do you see this? It's a disgrace, a public health hazard!" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the side of her new house. She gestured wildly at Bessie, who simply chewed her cud, her big ears twitching. Liam approached cautiously, his hands raised in a calming gesture. "I'm so sorry. She must have gotten through the fence. I'll get her right back." "You'll get her." Penny's voice was incredulous. "This is a 1,000-pound animal defecating on my property. Do you have any idea how much we paid for this landscaping? We had a designer flown in from Santa Monica." "I'll clean it up," Liam said, his voice low and placating. He tried to get Bessie's attention. "Come on, girl. Let's go." But Bessie wasn't listening. She seemed to have taken a dislike to the woman's tone. The more Penny yelled, the more Bessie seemed to settle in, a bovine protester on a lawn of corporate green. "Oh, she's not going anywhere," Penny snarled, pulling a phone from her pocket. "I'm calling the police. This is a clear case of trespassing and public nuisance. We have rights. We're not going to live next to some farm-tastrophe?" The word hung in the air, dripping with condescension. Liam felt a slow burn rise in his chest. She's a cow, ma'am. She's not any catastrophe. She's just a cow who got lost. I'll lead her home, and that will be the end of it. The end of it? Penny's voice reached a new crescendo. My real estate agent said this was a quiet, rustic community. Not a barnyard. You're going to be hearing from my lawyer. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at Liam, then at Bessie, her whole body shaking with rage. The sudden jerky movement, the shrill pitch of her voice, it was all too much for Bessie. The cow shifted her weight, a low groan rumbling in her chest. She took one step back, then another, a massive, deliberate retreat. That's it, Penny said, a triumphant, almost manic look on her face. She's scared now. As she should be, you see? You're not in charge here anymore. Bessie didn't stop. She kept backing up, a ponderous, graceful retreat, until she bumped against something solid. It was the back bumper of the brand-new charcoal gray Range Rover, pristine and gleaming in the morning light. Get away from my car, Penny shrieked. Don't you dare! That cost more than your whole farm. Liam saw it coming a split second before it happened. He saw the shift in Bessie's weight, the way her legs began to bend. He saw the look of pure, unadulterated serenity in her eyes as she began to lower herself. Penny was in a full-blown frenzy, her arms flailing, her voice a series of panicked yelps. No, don't you dare, you stupid beast! Get off my car! But Bessie was already committed. She sighed, a long, gusty exhalation that ruffled the grass. Her massive haunches settled first. Then her full weight, a mountain of black and white, came to rest on the gleaming hood of the Range Rover. The sickening groan of metal on metal was a symphony of cosmic justice. The hood buckled, the windshield spiderwebbed, and Bessie closed her eyes, utterly and completely at peace. She was home. The silence that followed was more profound than any noise could ever be. It was the silence of disbelief, a vacuum where sound had just been a shrieking, chaotic torrent. Penny Harrington stood frozen, her mouth a perfect, horrified O. The Range Rover groaned, a long, drawn-out metallic sigh, as the immense weight of Bessie settled deeper into its frame. The windshield, which had only moments before been a crystal-clear pane, now looked like a shattered spiderweb, its cracks radiating out from the very spot where Bessie's chin rested. Bessie, for her part, looked like a particularly comfortable four-legged king on a throne of dented steel and broken glass. She chewed her cud slowly, her big brown eyes half closed in bovine contentment. Liam's own body was a statue of shock. He had expected the worst, but not this. Not this poetic, absurd, and financially catastrophic act of passive aggression. The urban entitled rage that had been radiating from Penny now seemed to fizzle and die, replaced by a dawning horror that was almost comical in its intensity. She looked at him, her eyes wide with a manic desperation. Call someone! Get her off! She stammered, her voice a thin, reedy imitation of its former fury. I'm not sure she'll move now, Liam said, the words feeling foreign in his own mouth. She likes it there. She likes it there? Penny shrieked, her voice regaining its power. She stormed toward the vehicle, then stopped abruptly, as if realizing the futility of confronting a cow that had just chosen her car as its new favorite napping spot. This is your fault! You and your filthy beast! The blare of a police siren cut through the morning air, a third layer of auditory absurdity to an already surreal scene. A small white Ford Explorer cruiser with the Copper Creek Valley Police Department emblem on the side pulled to the curb, its blue and red lights a garish strobe against the soft morning light. A young officer, no older than 30, stepped out. He was clean-cut and looked utterly baffled. Officer Miller surveyed the scene. The immaculate lawn, the pristine new house, the furious woman, and the enormous cow napping on a very expensive SUV. He stared for a long moment, a slow grin spreading across his face. He quickly wiped it away, but the hint of it remained in the twitch of his lips. Ma'am, what seems to be the problem? He asked, his voice formal but his eyes giving away his amusement. The problem? Penny shrieked, gesturing wildly. The problem is that this farmer's cow has destroyed my car. He let it escape. This is criminal negligence. Look at it. The windshield is ruined. The hood is caved in. Officer Miller, bless his heart, took out his notepad and a pen. He walked around the car, his boot-clad feet sinking slightly into the soft, perfect sod. He scribbled a note, then peered at Bessie, who opened one eye to regard him with mild curiosity. "And what's the cow's name?" he asked, completely deadpan. Penny's face flushed a deep crimson. "I don't care what its name is. I want it gone! I want him arrested! Look at this mess!" "You have to do something." "I am," Officer Miller said, still scribbling. "I'm taking a statement." He looked at Liam. "Sir, can you explain what happened?" Liam, who had been trying to get Bessie's attention to no avail, finally spoke. "She got through a weak spot in the fence. I was coming to get her, and then, well, Mrs. Harrington started yelling. I think Bessie didn't like it." "You think?" Penny spat. "You're blaming my emotional response for the destruction of my property?" "It was a reaction," Liam said, trying to choose his words carefully. "Bessie's a very sensitive cow. She's not used to that much noise." Officer Miller finished his notes and looked at both of them. "Ma'am, this isn't a criminal matter. It's a civil one. The damage to your vehicle? You'll have to go through Mr. Liam here for that. Or your insurance. I'm just going to write a report." "A report?" Penny was now shaking with barely contained fury. "Is that all you have to say?" "This is my property, and it has been vandalized by a domestic animal. My husband paid an obscene amount for that SUV. "I understand, ma'am," the officer said calmly. "But under state law, livestock owners are responsible for the actions of their animals. You can sue him. You can take him to small claims court. But it's not a police matter." He handed a small card to Penny. "Here's my card. My report number will be on there. You can give it to your insurance agent. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go write this up." He nodded curtly to Liam, who felt a bizarre mix of relief and dread. As the cruiser pulled away, Liam knew the real battle was just beginning. Penny turned on him, her eyes hard and cold. The raw emotion was gone, replaced by a calculating, dangerous stillness. "You think this is over?" she asked, her voice low and menacing. "It's not. My husband Ken is a very important man. He's a partner at a corporate law firm in the city. You're going to pay for every single cent of this damage. And then some. We're going to sue you for emotional distress, for property damage, for everything. We're going to take this farm from you, piece by piece." The words were a direct hit. Liam felt his carefully constructed composure shatter. The farm was his legacy, his identity, the only thing that mattered. She couldn't take it. She wouldn't. The thought of losing it, of the land being paved over and replaced with more gray boxes, was a physical pain in his chest. "My family has been on this land for 5 generations, he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You can't just come here and threaten to take it away." "Oh, I can, and I will," Penny replied, a cruel smile touching her lips. "You just don't understand the kind of people you're dealing with. We have resources. We have power. You just have a cow that needs to be put down." The last words hit him like a hammer blow. Put down. The thought of harming Bessie, of losing her, was unbearable. It was a line that couldn't be crossed. "Don't you dare," Liam said, his voice now a low growl. "You touch that cow and I will—" "You'll what?" Penny sneered. "You'll send your pet to destroy something else? This is not your world anymore, farmer. This is our world. And in our world, animals don't get to wander around and ruin million-dollar cars. They get to be dealt with." She took a final, triumphant look at the cow on her car, a look of cold, satisfied revenge. "Enjoy your victory, Liam. It's going to be the last one you ever have." She then stalked off toward the front door of her house, pulling her phone to her ear. "Ken? It's Penny. You're not going to believe what happened." "We have a problem. A big rural problem." Liam watched her go, a cold dread settling in his stomach. He wasn't a fighter. He was a farmer. But as he looked at the serene, slumbering Bessie on the hood of the SUV, and then back at the gleaming, soulless house, he knew he had no choice. He would have to fight, not for the money or for the car, but for his home, for Bessie, for everything. The battle for the last farm in the valley had just begun, and this was only the first shot. The morning sun, once a harbinger of peaceful work, now felt like a spotlight on a crime scene. Bessie, having found her new favorite resting place, remained utterly immobile. Liam, after watching Penny stalk back into her house, stood staring at the absurdity of the tableau. The silence was broken only by the faint rhythmic sound of Bessie chewing her cud and the low, unsettling groans of the Range Rover's compromised chassis. He couldn't just yank her off. Not only would it likely injure the placid beast, but it would cause even more damage to the luxury car. This wasn't a matter of brute force. It was a matter of bovine diplomacy. He tried every trick he knew. He called Bessie's name in a low, coaxing voice. He held out a bucket of her favorite grain, its contents clinking invitingly. Nothing. Bessie had made her choice. And for a cow so deeply tied to the land, this act of defiant occupation was as unshakable as a mountain. It was an unspoken statement. She was not going to be intimidated. And in that moment, Liam felt a surge of pride in his gentle giant, even as the dread of what was to come settled in his stomach. He eventually gave up on the coaxing and made a series of frantic calls. The first was to his friend Dave, the local mechanic and tow truck operator. Dave just laughed. "A cow, Liam. On a brand new Range Rover? You can't make this stuff up. I'll come over, but I ain't guaranteeing anything. That's a delicate operation. You need a vet and a whole team of people, probably." The second call was to his own insurance agent, a quiet man named Jim who had insured the farm for 30 years. Jim's voice on the other end of the line was grim. "Liam, I'm not sure what to tell you. This is unprecedented. We have livestock liability clauses, of course, but a cow willingly sitting on a vehicle? That's going to be a tough one. The Harringtons' insurance will likely subrogate against us for the damages, and then it's a matter of who's at fault. Given that the fence was breached, they have a case." Liam hung up the phone, feeling as if a physical weight had been placed on his shoulders. He felt exposed, vulnerable. He was a man of the earth, of tangible work and simple truths. The world of insurance policies, lawyers, and civil suits was a foreign country to him, one where he was hopelessly outmatched. A few hours later, as he was finally getting Bessie to shift with a carefully placed bale of hay and a lot of gentle pushing, a sleek black town car pulled into the Harringtons' driveway. Ken Harrington emerged first. Unlike his wife, he wasn't yelling or gesturing wildly. He was impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored suit, his expression a mask of cold, professional neutrality. A younger man, also in a suit, followed him out of the car, carrying a black leather briefcase. Ken saw Bessie on the car, and his lips thinned into a hard, straight line. There was no theatrical rage, no theatrics at all. Just a cold, dangerous stillness that was far more intimidating than his wife's histrionics. He turned to the younger man and spoke in a low voice that didn't carry to Liam. The younger man nodded, opened the briefcase, and pulled out a long, legal-sized envelope. Liam's heart hammered against his ribs. He knew what this was. He felt a deep, primal fear, the kind of fear a deer feels when it senses a wolf. He was not a deer. He was a farmer. But in this new world, with these new people, the rules were different. Ken walked to the edge of his pristine lawn, stopping just short of the grass that Bessie had so thoroughly ruined. He looked at Liam, his gaze clinical and dismissive, as if he were an insect to be studied. "Mr. Liam," Ken said, his voice a polished baritone, the kind of voice that was trained to command respect in a courtroom. "I understand we have an issue." "I'm working on it," Liam replied, his hands in his pockets, his body tense. "Working on it is a rather vague term, wouldn't you agree?" Ken said, a hint of disdain in his tone. "My wife explained the situation. While I appreciate your, shall we say, rustic approach to neighborly disputes, I prefer a more formal resolution. My associate here has prepared a preliminary document for you." The younger man stepped forward and offered the envelope to Liam. His face was just as impassive as Ken's. He could have been a machine. Liam took the envelope. It felt heavy in his hands, not with weight, but with the burden of what was inside. He didn't open it. He just held it. "You're threatening to sue me," Liam said, the words a statement, not a question. "Threatening is a strong word," Ken replied smoothly. "I prefer to think of it as seeking appropriate remuneration for a series of actionable offenses, including but not limited to property damage, gross negligence, and public nuisance. This document simply outlines the claims. My wife tells me you also threatened her. I assure you that is an entirely separate matter that we will also pursue to the fullest extent of the law. I didn't threaten her, Liam said, his voice rising in frustration. I said, "Don't you dare touch that cow." She said she was going to have her put down. Ken's perfect lips curled into a thin, humorless smile. And I'm sure that is precisely how you intended it. Unfortunately, in a court of law, it's about perception, not intention. And my wife perceived it as a direct threat. You see, Mr. Liam, this isn't just about a broken windshield. This is about a complete and utter disregard for the sanctity of private property. This is about the law, something I'm quite familiar with. He paused, letting his words sink in. The silence was heavier than before, the air thick with unspoken threats. Ken looked from Liam to Bessie and back again. The quiet farmer and his ancient cow facing off against a modern, soulless monolith. I'm prepared to be generous, Ken said, his voice a low, confidential murmur, as if he were sharing a secret. We can settle this out of court. Get that animal off my car and pay for the damage, and for the inconvenience, and for the emotional distress. I'll let my associate get you a number. Or, he said, his eyes narrowing, we can go to court, and I promise you, you will lose. And when you do, we'll own every single one of those hills. The choice is yours. With that final, chilling ultimatum, Ken turned on his heel and walked back to his town car. The younger man followed, leaving Liam standing there alone, a single, legal-sized envelope in his hand. The weight of it was crushing. He looked down at the paper and then up at Bessie, who was still snoozing contentedly on the hood of the Range Rover. The battle for the valley was no longer a matter of a few broken fence planks. It was a matter of survival. And Liam knew, with a terrifying certainty, that he was already losing. The legal envelope felt like a stone in Liam's hand, a physical manifestation of the crushing weight on his shoulders. He didn't open it right away. He couldn't. He spent the rest of the morning trying to persuade Bessie off the car, her placid contentment a silent mockery of his mounting desperation. Finally, with the help of his friend Dave and a carefully orchestrated bribe of sweet feed, they managed to get her to stand, her hooves leaving deep hoof-shaped dents in the buckled hood. The Range Rover now looked less like a luxury vehicle and more like a modern sculpture entitled Bovine Indifference. He led Bessie back to the pasture, her return through the temporarily repaired fence feeling like a retreat. The victory was momentary, hollow. The real fight was just beginning. He went inside, the legal envelope still in his hand, and sat at his kitchen table, the well-worn wood a stark contrast to the sterile, professional menace of the paper. He finally opened it. The documents were a litany of legal jargon, statement of claim, remuneration for damages, emotional and punitive distress. The specific numbers were outlined on the final page. The total was a number with so many zeros it made his head spin. It was more than the value of his entire farm. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a liquidation. They didn't want money. They wanted everything. A sick feeling settled in the pit of his stomach. He was a simple farmer. His wealth wasn't in a bank account. It was in the land, in the old barn, in the health of his herd. He had no way of paying this. He was defeated before he even began. He spent the next few hours on the phone. His insurance agent, Jim, called him back, his voice thick with professional regret. "Liam, I'm sorry. I looked into it. The policy covers livestock getting loose and causing accidental damage to property. A car, a fence, a mailbox, it's all standard. But there's a clause. It says something about the owner having a reasonable duty of care to maintain fences and enclosures. The Harrington's lawyer is arguing that because your fence was old and poorly maintained, you were negligent. It's a gray area, but the company's legal team is saying it's a tough one to fight. They're advising you to settle. Settle with what?" Liam's voice was hollow. "They want the farm." "I know, Liam. I'm so sorry." The call ended, leaving Liam more alone than ever. He paced the length of his kitchen, the floorboards groaning under his weight. He felt a deep primal panic. He wasn't just going to lose his farm. He was going to lose his history, the home his grandfather and great-grandfather had built. He couldn't let that happen. He just didn't know how to stop it. Desperate, he drove to the one place in town where he knew he could find a glimmer of old-world wisdom, Martha's General Store. Martha was an 80-year-old woman whose family had been in the valley since before it was even a valley. She knew every family, every story, every secret. She was the living history of Copper Creek. He found her behind the counter, her hands deftly bagging groceries for an elderly woman. The air inside the store smelled of cinnamon and floor wax and 100 years of stories. He waited until the customer left, then approached her, the despair etched on his face. "Liam," she said, her voice soft. "You look like you've been run over by a Range Rover." He gave a hollow laugh. "Something like that." "Martha, I'm in trouble. The Harringtons. They're suing me. They're going to take the farm." Martha's kind face hardened. "I knew they were trouble. That big cold house. No life in it. Just money." She leaned against the counter, her eyes thoughtful. "The Harringtons might have a law degree, but they don't know this land. They don't know its history." "What do you mean?" Liam asked, a flicker of hope in his chest. "The old homestead. Old man Cooper lived there. He was a bit eccentric. He had a few disputes with your grandpa over the fence line way back when, but they worked it out. They signed a formal notarized agreement. Not a fancy one, mind you. Just a handwritten thing kept in a coffee can in the barn." Liam's heart was hammering. What was in the agreement? Martha's eyes, bright and clear, looked right into his. It was a right-of-way. Old man Cooper gave your grandpa and his descendants a permanent right-of-way for livestock to graze on a small 5-foot strip of land that was technically on his property. It ran right along the fence line. He did it so your grandpa wouldn't have to rebuild the whole fence, and in exchange, your grandpa helped him fix his roof. It was a gentleman's agreement, sealed with a notary seal and a handshake, but their house is on the Cooper property, right where that strip of land would have been, Liam said, his mind racing. "That's the beauty of it," Martha said, a sly grin forming on her lips. "When they tore down the old house, they probably didn't even know what that coffee can was. They probably threw it out. But old man Cooper's old workshop? That's where the other copy of the agreement was." She paused, and her eyes held a mischievous glint. "He had a fire safe in the wall of that old workshop. The fire burned the workshop down years ago, but the safe was fireproof. I helped him move it into his shed before he passed. It was his greatest treasure, he said. He said it had all his important papers." Suddenly, the cold dread was replaced by a fiery resolve. It wasn't a legal battle anymore. It was a search, a quest for a hidden artifact that held the fate of his farm. He thanked Martha and ran out of the store, his mind buzzing. He drove back to his farm, his eyes now seeing the world differently. He looked at the Harringtons' immaculate yard, at the pristine gray house. He looked at the small concrete slab where old man Cooper's workshop had once stood, now covered by a perfect green lawn. And then he saw it. A small, dark spot on the edge of the property line, half hidden by a bush. It was the remains of the old shed where Martha had said the safe was stored. He walked over to the spot, his boots sinking into the wet earth. He pulled back the overgrown branches and saw the unmistakable shape of a small rectangular object, a rusted, half-buried fireproof safe. It was covered in moss and dirt, but it was there. He had to dig it up. He had to get it open. The Harringtons may have had the law on their side, but he had history. He had the land. And he had the ghost of old man Cooper. The safe was a stubborn, rusted cube of iron. Liam's hands, calloused and strong from a lifetime of farm work, ached as he tried every tool he owned on the stubborn lock. It was too old, too corroded, its tumblers frozen solid by decades of rain and earth. He had dug it up from the soft, wet ground behind the Harringtons' perfect shrubbery, a silent act of rebellion against the sterile suburban order. He dragged it back to his barn, the ghost of old man Cooper and Martha's whispered hope giving him strength. He tried a chisel and a hammer, but the metal was too tough. He tried a crowbar, but the safe was so dense and heavy it just bent the steel. The Harringtons' town car was parked in their driveway, a constant, silent reminder of the forces he was up against. He knew he didn't have much time. They were already moving. He'd seen the lights on late into the night. The perfect silhouette of Ken working in his office, no doubt preparing the legal filings that would evict Liam from his home. The next morning, his phone rang. It was Jim, his insurance agent, his voice even more somber. "Liam, they've filed a preliminary injunction. They're saying your property is a hazard and they want to force a sale to cover their damages. They're asking the court for a fast-track hearing. They're coming after you, Liam. Hard and fast." Liam felt the last of his hope drain away, replaced by a cold, desperate resolve. There was only one way. He went to his workshop, the same one his grandfather had built. The air smelled of sawdust and old oil. He found the oxyacetylene torch, a relic he used for welding broken tractor parts. He had to be careful. The document inside was old, likely fragile. He worked on the hinge, the acetylene flame a brilliant, concentrated point of searing heat. The steel glowed a furious orange, then red. He worked slowly, the heat and the sound of the torch a symphony of determination. The hinge finally gave way with a groan of tortured metal. He pried the safe open, the lid creaking like a long-dead ghost. Inside, a sealed, rusted metal box sat nested in the middle. The rust had sealed it tight. He carefully pried it open with a screwdriver, the metal screeching in protest. Inside, there was a stack of papers. A deed for the Cooper property, a few old legal documents, and a single folded piece of thick yellowed paper. He pulled it out. It was a handwritten agreement penned in a spidery antique script. It was dated 1965. At the bottom, there was a faded signature, Old Man Cooper. And right below that, the unmistakable sprawling signature of his own grandfather. A small circular notary stamp was impressed on the corner, and a ribbon tied with a wax seal. He read the words, his heart pounding in his chest. It was all there. A permanent right-of-way for livestock on a 5-foot strip of land along the shared property line. It was an unbreakable legal document, a testament to a time when a handshake and a simple, written word were enough to secure a man's future. He drove to the Harringtons' house, the document folded carefully in his pocket. The Harringtons were outside, directing a small group of landscapers who were measuring the damage to the grass. A tow truck was just pulling up to take the dented Range Rover away. Liam walked across the pristine lawn, his boots leaving muddy footprints on the perfect sod. Penny saw him first, and her face contorted into a mask of pure rage. "Get off my property, you menace!" she shrieked. Ken turned, and his face too hardened. "I told you, Mr. Liam, all communication from this point forward must be through my lawyer." "I'm not here to talk to your lawyer," Liam said, his voice quiet but firm. He pulled the document from his pocket and unfolded it. "I'm here to show you this." Ken's face remained a mask of professional indifference, but Liam saw a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. He took the paper, unfolded it, and his eyes, which had been so cold and confident, widened in genuine surprise. He read the words, and his expression shifted from disbelief to a dawning, terrible realization. His perfect composure finally cracked. He looked up from the paper, his eyes now filled with a bewildered rage. What is this?" he stammered. "It's a permanent notarized right-of-way for my livestock to graze on that 5-foot strip of land right there," Liam said, pointing to the spot where Bessie had sat on their Range Rover. "The same 5-foot strip of land that your car was on. The same 5-foot strip that Old Man Cooper granted my grandpa in 1965. Penny, who had been listening with a sneer, scoffed. "A piece of paper? You think that's going to hold up in court? This is just an old scribble. My husband is a corporate lawyer. He deals with contracts worth millions of dollars." "This is an easement," Ken said, his voice flat. He looked at his wife, a cold, furious look in his eyes. "A permanent easement. It's a legal right-of-way. It means his cows have the legal right to be on that land. And my car was on that land." He looked back at Liam, his perfect world falling apart. "You knew about this." "I didn't," Liam said honestly. "I just found it. You see, this isn't about property, Mr. Harrington. This is about history. This land has rules. You can buy the land, but you can't buy the history that comes with it. You can't just erase a handshake." The silence that followed was more profound than the one after Bessie sat on the car. It was the silence of a man who had built his life on a foundation of money and power, suddenly discovering that the ground beneath him was not his at all, but belonged to a ghost and a farmer. The tow truck driver stared. The landscapers stopped working. and a group of curious neighbors watched from their front windows. Ken looked at the document, his defeat absolute. His whole case, the negligence, the punitive damages, the emotional distress, it all hinged on Liam's lack of a right to be there. And he had a right, a permanent, legally binding one. His own flawless legal mind told him he had no case. It was over. He slowly crumpled the paper and threw it on the ground. "This isn't over," he hissed. You can't just do this." "Actually," Liam said calmly, "I can." And I did. "I'll make you a deal. You drop the lawsuit. I'll get a new notary to formalize a new right-of-way, and we can start over, be better neighbors. Or we can go to court, and I'll show a judge the original document. I'll let them decide who has the right to be on that land, me and my cow, or you and your broken SUV. Ken looked at his perfectly manicured lawn, at the destroyed SUV, at his enraged wife, and then at the crumpled paper on the ground. For a moment, a flicker of understanding crossed his face. He bent down, picked up the paper, and slowly, carefully smoothed it out. He looked at Liam, a new kind of respect in his eyes. It was not the respect of equals, but the respect a man of power gives to a man who has bested him in a game he thought he'd invented. "You win, farmer," Ken said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Liam just nodded. He didn't feel like he had won. He felt like he had defended something that was his, something that was priceless. As he walked away, he saw Ken turn to Penny, his head shaking slowly. The battle for the valley was over. The land and the cow had won, and a new story was about to begin.